Let's take a couple of audience questions that I think perhaps align with the conversation we're having right now. Here's a question from Lubena. The current manufacturing and purification processes cause limitations in the production capacity. What is the strategy, according to you, to overcome these limitations? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, maybe I can start just based on sort of my own recent experience. So we have a product or a molecule that we want to get into the clinic. It was pretty low expression in our initial attempts to develop a cell line, and of course, we could spend more time on cell line development to improve productivity, but we were also now faced with the pressure of moving that program forward as quickly as we can. Again, very competitive space. We want to be able to move our product to the clinic and available to patients as quickly as we can. It was clear that the existing platform and my definition of the platform wouldn't be able to accommodate our strategic goals. We were able to use process intensification strategies in partnership with our CDMO to really enable us to take our low producing cell line and turn it into something that enabled us to get into the clinic on time with sufficient amount of material. Now that really represents sort of our short-term needs. In the longer term, we will also need to then evaluate whether or not that process is sufficient to take us even further down the road to eventual commercialization. But that initial sort of roadblock was able to be overcome through some of these process efficiency initiatives.
Great. Avril, anything to add there?
Yeah, I might add a smaller step to looking at all of this together would be using a process model. And there are a lot of different options for that. But some of the examples that I've seen are when somebody does an intensification, but it's focused on only one unit op or a set of unit ops, and therefore they create problems elsewhere or more cost elsewhere. A process model might have helped you see that big picture before you got into that situation. So consider that.
Terrific. All right. I'm going to defer a couple questions to the questions from the audience. That is to a bit later, so we can make sure that we get through some of the important questions we had and the polling questions we had coming up here. So we got a polling question coming up, but before we get to that, Dr. Lee, I'm going to ask you to share your thoughts on the importance of CDMO selection, particularly for a small company like UltraBio. You see a trade-off between CDMOs who offer sort of a one-stop shop for everything versus more specialized CDMOs or CROs that offer expertise in particular areas like cell line and formulation development?
It's a really important consideration for a company like UltraBio. So we're a small biotech, and really we're in the business of bringing sort of innovative drugs to patients. And so there will be a trade-off, because I think most sort of one-stop shop CDMOs really are fully leveraging a platform process which has been developed for monoclonal antibodies. So that accounts for the majority of the business, right, for high volume biologics. But as we've been discussing here today, a lot of the more complex molecules, and I would say that includes kind of innovative molecules that UltraBio is developing, doesn't necessarily fit that one-stop shop mentality, right? So, for example, if we needed some more work done on developing a subcutaneous formulation for our drug, for example, at a high concentration, a one-stop shop CDMO may or may not have that capability. They're purely focused on what do the majority of customers need, not the kind of niche activities that an UltraBio might need. So then that leads to a bit of a conundrum, because for a company like ours, who we want to be innovative, we want to push the envelope, not only in terms of the the patients we serve, but also in the design of our drugs. Do we then go with the sort of more specialty CROs, knowing that there will have to be a tech transfer later on to a manufacturing partner? Or do we, think about the big picture, the long-term strategy, and say, well, we're willing to trade off a little bit of innovation on the molecule side, go with a more standard monoclonal antibody because we know that the path, to manufacturing and approval is a little bit more straightforward. So it's a tough question. I think we've certainly opted for the more innovative approach. We think that will bring the most value to the patients, but it does then create those sorts of interesting conversations around how to select CDMOs and CROs to make this all work.
Mm-hmm. Averill, is that one you wanted to weigh in on at all?
Yeah, I think it's similar to Jean's response at EQRX and our tech ops group. We talk about what we should be good at, and we're still having that discussion. So at least with the poll and the questions or the options that are here, I would have to say that, again, your qualification on the most direct route makes me think a little bit differently about this question and what the audience might respond with. I can tell you that continuous manufacturing takes a lot of time. There's a lot of case studies around how long it's taken the leaders in continuous to do what they've done. Reducing costs of materials and consumables, our supply chains as they are, nothing's going down in cost, seems like. In-house manufacturing, very expensive, very different skill sets. Outsourcing, I think Jean covered that really well. Single-use technology, I don't know if it's the most direct route, but it should be an option that people are considering. And we've seen, I think, an expansive use of that in the industry, in my career at least. So very curious to see what the audience said.
Yeah, well, thanks, Averill. To be honest with you, I didn't even realize that the polling question had been presented until you started reflecting on that. So, Miles, if we've got a good response, then why don't we throw those responses up and perhaps get some reflection on. Yeah, like you said, Averill, 43.5% moved to continuous manufacturing. Quite an undertaking, though, right?
Yeah, I think. I said the time and the investment, the specialty skills that are needed. But there's also some technology catch up that needs to be done. But it's getting there. I mean, we do have leaders who are doing it, so.
And Averill, you're probably, much more familiar with this than I am, but, I think there's been quite a bit of selling of continuous manufacturing as a way to reduce facility costs or operational flexibility, and that could be very attractive to the decision makers.
Oh yeah. Again, there's a commitment associated with that in terms of people and time and cost as well up front. But there are many case studies showing what companies have done, how they've been successful, and what they've achieved. And they're real.
Yeah. And I guess the beauty of continuous as well is that it doesn't really require a wholesale change in the thinking of how the process works, right? I mean, it's taking those unit operations and making them continuous. I know that's an oversimplification, but at least the logic of how the process operates is largely intact.
Yeah, it's eliminating a lot of non-value add steps. And then we're seeing a lot of adoption of parts of continuous. So your whole process may not be continuous, but parts of it. And that is following on from some lessons learned in the small molecule world.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see as well. I'm sorry, Matt. This is too interesting of a topic. Good. Yeah, but it's interesting to me as well, probably for all of these poll question topics, that it's really being enabled by technology suppliers as well. So, if you wanted to do continuous, if you wanted, to adopt single-use technologies, et cetera, there are vendors, there are suppliers that can really help enable setting up those sorts of processes.